Welcome to another Chalk or Not segment. This week we're talking about UFC Vegas 106, and I'm going to try to help you avoid some of the landmines on this card that are seen as the chalky spots, and I'll let you know whether they are chalk-worthy or not, whether you can throw them into parlays, whether you can play them straight up, or whether you should just avoid them altogether. I got you covered here on the Chalk or Not segment, and a reminder that in my opinion and in my definition, chalk is considered anything that is minus 185 or wider. So for this card, 7 out of the 12 scheduled fights have fighters that are considered in the chalk territory. Let's see if how many of them, or I believe, are chalk-worthy, and whether I believe they are safe enough to throw into parlays or just play straight up here. So let's get right into this. I don't want to waste too much more time. I'm going to go over these matchups briefly and then categorize them chalk or not, as you guys see on the screen here. First matchup of the night, we got Tisha Pennington coming in at minus 350, going up against Luana Pinheiro. And this is a weird one for me because I'm a big Tisha Pennington fan. You know, Tisha Torres, Tiny Tornado. She's a very fun fighter in terms of she's a great all-around fighter. You know, she has solid striking, good grappling, improving defensive grappling. But the issue in a lot of her fights is that they play out a lot closer than they should. You know, that there are fights where they go to split decisions, and sometimes she deserves the victory, sometimes she does not. We saw her get out grappled by Carla Esparza in the first and third round, but do a good enough job defensively to try and nullify most of it. But a lot of people thought Esparza should have gotten the decision that night. Here against Pinheiro, Pinheiro can match her physicality. Pinheiro might be the better striker in terms of landing more effective damage and making it look good optically for the judges once this fight hits the scorecards, because, you know, let's face it, all of Tisha Pennington's fights mainly hit the scorecards. She has great durability, as she's never been finished in her career. And her 2 wins, one was by submission earlier on in her career, and the other was by TKO, which she had over Sam Hughes after the first round where Hughes suffered a bad injury to her eye. But it wasn't a knockout by any means. So she doesn't really hurt anybody. She's not a big finishing threat. And here against Pinheiro, I think Pinheiro can be competitive, especially through the first 2 rounds before Pinheiro starts to slow down. But even with that said, Pennington is not a fighter that sets a very high pace. So this is a fight that Pinheiro can be very competitive in and more than likely pull the upset off, which is why I'm going to have to put Pennington in the not chalk-worthy category. This is not a fighter that has fights that often are wide enough for you to be like, I'm okay with potentially wagering money on her to make this fight look like it, you know, is over 35, between 75 and 80% indicated that she wins this matchup. I just don't agree with that. All right, next up, another women's bout here where we got Denise Gomes coming in at minus 550 going up against Elise Reed. Now, Gomes, I believe she's a minus 550 favorite here because people are thinking that she's going to be able to get this fight to the ground and grind Reed out from that top position or eventually find that finishing position. I disagree with that. She's historically 25% takedown defense rate, 25% takedown accuracy rate, whereas Reed, I believe she has a 56% takedown defense rate. But Gomes is not known for being that fighter that just mauls opponents once they hit the ground or get fights to the ground and tries to take advantage of them there. You know, if Reed is successful with keeping this fight upright and she can get her space and force Gomes to strike with her, this is a much closer fight than minus 550 indicates on Gomes. You know, this is a fight that could be won on, you know, a very thin line, and I'm still picking Gomes to win this matchup. I think it comes down to her maybe not getting the takedowns, but at least pushing Reed up against the cage and getting some control time there and just chipping away at her with some knees and some body work. But again, that's a very tough style to be minus 550 confident on, because if she can't assert her dominance up against the cage, or if she can't assert her dominance on the mat, Reed, technically speaking, might be the better striker with the Taekwondo style that we've come to see from her. And there have been fights in the past where she's been taken down numerous times, the Jinyu Fry fight, for example, and she still managed to win it on the scorecards because she's able to outweigh the control time of her opponents by landing more effective damage on the feet. Could be a possibility here as well. Thus, I have to put Denise Gomes, even though I'm picking her to win, I'm going to put her in the not chalk-worthy category. All right, next up, we got UFC newcomer Yadir Valle coming in at minus 430, going up against Connor Matthews. Now, Valle looks like a very solid prospect with an 8-0 clean record, has faced some of the best competition that Fury FC has had to throw at him, and he's come out on top. He's very physical. He's a bull when he's inside the cage, just as he showcased when he earned his contract through the Contender Series this past season, pretty much squashing his opponent over the course of 15 minutes, not giving him a minute to breathe, and then getting that decision victory. I expect him to do the same thing here against Matthews, who's, on a 2-fight losing streak in the UFC, hasn't gotten his hand raised yet at this level. He relies a lot on his physicality and his power, but that's not going to be able to get him much done here against Valle, who I think is better in those, or, is stronger, is faster, is more powerful. And I think that's going to cause Matthews to have to be on the defensive more often than not. Look for Valle to grind this fight out. Look for him to keep Matthews on the defensive for the most part. I think he wins this fight pretty clearly. I just don't see where Matthews has the edge, other than maybe a Hail Mary nuke that he lands on Valle. But from all indications, it looks like Valle has a pretty good durability and striking defense game, which should lead to him grinding this fight out, winning it on the scorecards, which is why I'll have to put him into the chalk-worthy category, as I think he can get it done here pretty convincingly. All right, next up, we got Matthias Camilo coming in at minus 225, going up against the returning Gabe Green, who will finally be going back down to lightweight, which is where he went 5-1 on the regional scene before coming to the UFC and settling in as a welterweight. Green has also been out of the cage for over 2 years now, dealing with a knee injury, and this is not the type of opponent he wants to be making his return against. Camilo earned his contract through looking for a fight this past season, where he was able to land big damage against his opponent and showcase some solid submission games off of his back, even when he was finding himself in compromising positions. Camilo trains out of Extreme Couture, has nasty calf kicks, has very good power striking, and he's getting better in terms of utilizing that more methodically, rather than just berserking into his opponent and trying to knock them out that way. I think this is going to be a very tough fight for Green to come back to. He loves to engage in the pocket and try to outstrike his opponent there, but I think Camilo has a little bit more firepower, a little bit better durability, and he's not a guy that's coming off of a 2-year-long layoff. Just yesterday, Camilo was minus 185, and it seems like the public is starting to pile in on him here, pushing him up to that minus 225 line. I'm going to say he's chalk-worthy here. I'd probably only say that up until about minus 300, but I think that this is a fight that Camilo can have solid success in and eventually produce a knockout victory. I like the under in this matchup as well. So once again, Camilo, chalk-worthy in this fight. All right, next up, we got Nursultan Ruziboev going up against Dustin Stoltzfus. Ruziboev coming in at minus 280. A little bit of love coming in on Stoltzfus over the last 24 hours. If you guys have been watching me for a while, I'm not a big Ruziboev fan. I think a lot of his record has been padded from his regional days, fighting every other week against tomato can level opponents. He's faced some decent opponents throughout that run. I don't want to completely shit on him. And he's obviously put together a decent run in the UFC outside of that loss that he had at the hands of Joaquin Buckley. That was a fight where Buckley was able to land multiple takedowns and grind that fight out, something that Stoltzfus is more than capable of doing in this matchup. Stoltzfus has really leveled up his game since joining the Extreme Couture guys, and that's helped fuel his BJJ black belt by really rounding out his wrestling game and being able to control opponents from that top position. I expect him to be able to do that here against Ruziboev, who's still a little bit of a work in progress off of his back. And obviously his length and his reach helps him stay a little bit safer than other opponents might be when they're on their back. But I still feel like Stoltzfus is educated enough in the grappling realm and BJJ game to keep Ruziboev in bad spots and maybe even get to a position where he can get a submission victory as well. Thus, if you can't guess it already, I'm going to be putting Ruziboev in the not chalk-worthy category. Next up, we got Rodolfo Bellato coming in at minus 550, going up against Paul Craig. This should be a violent matchup. Bellato is not a guy that should instill minus 550 confidence either, considering how close we've seen a lot of his fights play out recently, even against a guy like Ihor Potieria, who was nearly able to finish him, or very close to finishing him in the first round of their matchup before he threw the kitchen sink at him and still was unable to get Bellato out of there, leading to Potieria slowing down and Bellato finishing him in the second round. That was also followed up by Jimmy Crute, nearly finishing Bellato in the first round of their matchup, getting 10-8s on 2 scorecards, which caused that fight to go to a majority draw once they hit the scorecards as Bellato bounced back in the second and third rounds. Who's to say Craig can't finagle his way to a grappling position here where he can get Bellato to the ground, where we'll know he has a tremendous advantage in that realm, even off his back. I'd be surprised if Bellato engages him on the mat here, but Craig has his weird ways of his reckless striking to try to engage in those spots, and Bellato is not a guy that's, super clean from a technical perspective. Sure, he's the better striker, but do you trust him at minus 550 knowing that he has a clear flaw in his game where he's very hittable and might be susceptible to be getting out-grappled and possibly submitted by a very dangerous submission specialist like Paul Craig? Minus 550 is not the line I want to be paying here. Thus, I'll have to put Bellato in the not chalk-worthy category. By the way, I'm pointing as if I'm assuming I know which way it's going to be. I believe it's, not chalk-worthy category. I believe it should be that side. Just saying, for my visual watchers here. All right, that brings us to the main event now, where we have 17-0 Ecuadorian prospect Michael Morales looking to take the prestige and the legitimacy of Gilbert Burns, former title challenger, in the main event of this match, of this fight night card, minus 850. That is wide, very close to 90% indicated for Morales here, and it's tough to really get behind that. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm picking Morales to win this matchup. I think his defensive wrestling is good enough to shut that down from Burns, and I think he is the more dangerous striker, but you cannot overlook the strength of schedule from Gilbert Burns, the fact that he's been 25 minutes multiple times, the fact that he, has a very dangerous jiu-jitsu game, the fact that he has some solid pop on his shots as well. Whereas Morales, he's coming off of a beatdown of Neo Magny last time around. You're talking about Neo Magny and then Gilbert Burns, right? And I've been a guy historically that's not that big on Gilbert Burns. I've faded him in numerous matchups. Sometimes it's bitten me in the ass. Other times it's worked out pretty well. And we have to respect his experience here, and that might come into play for him going up against a youngster like Morales, 25 years old. I get he has 17 professional MMA fights under his belt, but he hasn't been fighting the highest level of competition throughout his career the way that Gilbert Burns has. I'm not picking Burns to win this matchup. I do not think he wins this fight. But I think the under 3.5 in this matchup is the best way to go, as I'm expecting whoever ends up winning here will likely be by finish. I think it's Morales. I think Morales eventually wears Burns down and lands that big shot to put him away. But I'm not willing to parlay him at minus 850, considering one, how little it will actually do for your parlay in the first place, and two, all the reasons I stated in favor of Gilbert Burns just now as well. So I have to put Michael Morales in the not chalk-worthy category, even though I think he wins the majority of this matchup. 90% is a little bit wide against somebody of the caliber of Gilbert Burns. There you guys go. Chalk or not for UFC Vegas 106. 2 segments dropped today. If you guys missed it, I dropped my top 3 dog of the night candidates for this card earlier today, so check out the YouTube page for that. And yeah, I'll be back tomorrow for the quick picks version of this UFC Vegas 106 card. See you guys then. Peace.